The Transportation Security Administration has largely been spared from the deep workforce cuts happening in other parts of the government. But TSA's new leader says the Trump administration is open to big reforms, including potential privatization. For more, Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday joins me. Justin, thanks for coming, and I feel like we've been here before.
Yeah, this is not a new idea, but it's got some new conversation around it for sure.
Well, what do we know about the Trump administration's plans for TSA?
Well, this idea of privatization has kind of floated in conservative circles for quite a while. And the Trump administration, though, has not said that they want to do this explicitly. But acting TSA Administrator Ha McNeil was asked about potentially privatizing TSA during a House Appropriations Homeland Security Subcommittee hearing on Tuesday. Here's what she said.
As we look to modernize TSA, stakeholders have a word in this committee and this Congress, and we look forward to working with them. Nothing is off the table. I think, again, the North Star for us at TSA is making sure that we are driving the highest level of security, the best passenger experience in the most efficient way possible. And so if new privatization schemes make sense, then we're happy to have that discussion to see what we can come up with. It's not an all or nothing game. There could be airports that choose to privatize and others that do not. I think that airport choice is really important as part of this as well.
Well, she brings up an interesting point there about partnering with the airports to try to make this decision. What is the background on the idea to privatize some, all, none of TSA?
Well, as I said, the Trump administration has not come out and put its stamp on any sort of formal plan. But the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 specifically suggests that a conservative administration could and should privatize TSA. One of the things that Project 2025 mentions is that TSA could do this rather quickly by expanding its screening partnership program to all airports. Now, the partnership program, it involves TSA contracting with private companies to provide security screening services at commercial airports. And this happens at a total of 22 airports across the country right now. And a lot of these are smaller regional airports who have decided to contract with private firms instead of using TSA officers. Of course, TSA currently handles screening functions at about 440 federalized airports nationwide. TSA employs about 50,000 transportation security officers to do that screening. So that would represent a massive expansion of the screening partnership program if they decide to act in any way on the Project 2025 recommendations. Again, there is nothing on paper to suggest that the Trump administration is doing this, but McNeil's comments certainly leave the door open to it.
Is the logic for privatizing TSA that it would be less expensive than employing government civilians as transportation security officers?
That's correct. The Heritage Foundation argues it would be less expensive, more efficient to contract with private companies. The argument is also just that TSA has not done a good job over the years in terms of screening out dangerous items. Of course, we've seen a lot of marketed improvements when you look at certain GAL reports and things like that in terms of TSA's ability to screen out dangerous items, guns, and things of that nature. They find hundreds of guns in passenger luggage every month. And so, of course, there's arguments about whether you actually need a TSA or not in the first place. But cost is one of the arguments. And that, of course, is something that you would need to analyze in further detail to get a good answer on.
Well, and there's a lot of technological developments on this front, too. Screening that is automated or touchless that, in theory, requires a lot fewer people to manage.
TSA is investing in a lot of that technology. One of their frequent asks to Congress every year is to fund those technology improvements at a higher level. For instance, some of their screening technology replacement programs are stretched out until the 2040s right now as part of their kind of budget projections. So there's a lot of technology investments going on at TSA, and it's something that the agency is really prioritizing in addition to its workforce.
So what do members of Congress have to say about this? There are TSA agents in every district, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a recent bill introduced by two Republican senators that would abolish the TSA outright and fully privatize airport security screening. Largely, though, I think you see a lot of bipartisan support for TSA. Just a couple of years ago, there was a bipartisan vote. Most members of Congress voted for it to give TSA officers a huge pay increase to bring them in line with other federal employees. Previously, they had been paid at a much lower level. And you frequently hear in comments during hearings that members of Congress are rather supportive of TSA and TSA officers. Both parties often highlight this issue. So I would say there's pretty bipartisan support for TSA right now, and we'll see where these proposals that reform kind of go against that backdrop.
So they're not making the argument that airport security is a fundamentally governmental function.
That's right. I think even with the Heritage Foundation's proposal, you would still have a TSA that oversees a legion of private security contractors. So that's key here is while that bill that I mentioned would abolish TSA, it would transfer its functions to the Federal Aviation Administration. The Heritage Foundation would keep TSA in place as kind of a headquarters management function overseeing private contractors. Everyone agrees that airport security needs to be overseen by the government. The debate that's kind of burbling up right now is whether you still need TSA federal officers doing this or private contractors could do it as well.
Do we get a hint as to what the administration might be thinking about in the 2026 budget?
This actually hasn't popped up in their skinny budget, at least. That budget would cut TSA by $247 million next year. McNeil, the TSA administrator, was asked about this during the hearing on Tuesday. She said the cuts would come from eliminating the requirement for TSA to staff airport exit lanes, and TSA could reduce its screening workforce by approximately 2%, so about 1,000 officers out of those 50,000 that I mentioned. She said that is a number TSA feels that it can manage even through busy travel seasons. So that's a relatively small cut compared to this idea of privatizing TSA airport security screening, and that did not show up in the budget proposal that we've seen so far, at least.
Well, TSA is largely represented by the American Federation of Government Employees as their labor union. What does AFGE have to say about this, and what's their relationship with DHS on the topic?
Well, AFGE has obviously long fought against proposals to privatize TSA, to privatize airport security screening, rather. Recently, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem terminated a collective bargaining agreement between TSA and AFGE that eliminated collective bargaining for TSOs in general. AFGE is now suing the Trump administration in federal court over the termination of that agreement, and there's a hearing next week on this that we'll be covering. So stay tuned for more there on that court battle. But certainly AFGE has come out in the past and really hammering against any sort of privatization of TSA.
There's a lot here to think about, and maybe a reminder that the next time you go through airport security, you should thank your TSA agent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Federal News Network's Justin Doubleday. Justin, thanks for the story this morning.
Thanks, Terry.
You can find Justin's story at federalnewsnetwork.com.